My name is Alara Vance. I'm 32 now, a woman who has learned to find her own light, but when this story truly began, I was 28 and living in the long, cool shadow cast by my family. My father, Arthur Vance, was a titan in Portland's real estate scene, the founder of Vance Sterling Properties, a company built on his formidable will and a philosophy of aggressive expansion. My older brother, Leo, was his reflection, the anointed heir, possessing all of my father's bravado but little of his underlying instinct. My younger sister, Clara, had long ago opted out of the family business, creating her own vibrant world of art and activism, a life my father indulgently dismissed as a charming eccentricity. And then there was me. The quiet one. The keeper of ledgers and drafter of quiet reports, the steady, unassuming middle child who, in the grand narrative of the Vance family, was a footnote. Our family's ritual was the Sunday dinner. It was held at my parents' home in the West Hills, a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the sprawling city lights. The house, like my father's ambition, was immaculate, impressive, and left little room for comfort. These dinners were not gatherings of warmth but assemblies of state, where Leo would recount his triumphs and my father would hold court. It was on one such evening, the scent of rosemary and rain hanging in the air, that the silence I had cultivated as a shield finally cracked. "You've always been so gentle, Alara," my father said, the word a soft-edged pejorative. He swirled the Pinot Noir in his glass, his gaze sweeping over me with a familiar, weary affection. "Not everyone is meant for the fray, and that's perfectly fine. But it's best to leave the heavy lifting to people like your brother." I placed my fork on the edge of my plate, the tines making a small, sharp sound against the porcelain. My hands, hidden in my lap, were trembling slightly. I looked up, meeting his eyes across the polished mahogany table. "And yet, Dad, aside from you, my gentle self is the only other person at this table who has consistently turned a profit on their assigned projects," I said, my voice softer than I intended, yet it carried across the sudden lull in conversation. Leo, seated beside him, let out a short, dismissive laugh. It was the same sound I'd heard my entire life, the punctuation mark on my perceived inadequacy. "Closing a few small residential leases isn't exactly heavy lifting, Ellie," he said, using the childhood nickname that always made me feel small. "Try managing a downtown high-rise development. Then we can talk." The rest of the dinner unfolded in its predictable rhythm. Leo spoke at length about the new steel and glass tower Vance Sterling was erecting in the Pearl District, a project I knew from my own quiet analysis was overleveraged and poorly timed. My father listened with rapt attention, his pride a palpable force in the room. Clara, ever the diplomat, steered the conversation toward a new gallery opening, a topic that held their interest for a fleeting moment before the talk returned to market shares and acquisition strategies. I sat in my chair, a ghost at the feast, the taste of my uneaten food turning to ash in my mouth. For years, I had tried to earn my place. I'd graduated with honors in urban planning and finance, sought out challenging roles within the company, and consistently delivered results that, while not flashy, were solid and dependable. I thought my work would speak for me. But in the Vance family, volume was mistaken for value. "You need more presence, Alara," my father would advise. "You don't have the fire for this game." It didn't matter that my meticulous research had saved the company from several of Leo's more reckless ventures. My contributions were absorbed into the corporate whole, uncredited and unseen. The change, when it came, was not a sudden storm but a quiet tide turning within me. It began in a sterile conference room on a gray Tuesday morning. I had spent 6 weeks developing a proposal for a cluster of dilapidated craftsman buildings in the Albina neighborhood. They were considered a write-off, a blighted block a dozen other developers had passed over. But I saw something else. I saw a micro-community. My plan was detailed and holistic: restore the historic facades, convert the interiors into affordable live-work spaces for local artists, and anchor the development with a community garden and a small co-op grocery. I had run the numbers, secured tentative interest from local artisan guilds, and created a vision that was both profitable and restorative. When my turn came to present, I felt a flicker of hope. My slides were beautiful, filled with architectural renderings and hopeful projections. I'd barely begun to explain the philosophy behind the project, the focus on human scale and community, when Leo interrupted. Albina? That's a sinkhole, he said with a wave of his hand, not even bothering to look at the screen. We'd pour millions in and get nothing back. It's a waste of our time. Actually, the projections show a significant long-term return, I started, trying to keep my voice steady. And the community goodwill. My father cut me off, his eyes on Leo. If your brother says it's not viable, it's not viable. Let's move on. What's next on the agenda? I stood there for a moment, my carefully prepared speech dying on my lips. The room moved on. My project, my vision, my weeks of work, had been erased in less than a minute. I sat down, my face hot with a shame that was quickly hardening into resolve. That evening, as the Portland rain fell in steady sheets against my apartment window, I made a promise to myself. If they wouldn't build my vision within their world, I would build it outside of theirs. I didn't storm out of Vance Sterling. That would have been a grand gesture, and I was not a creature of grand gestures. Instead, I began to quietly divest my life from theirs. I started with a small, forgotten bungalow in the Hawthorne district, a house with good bones but a weary soul. It was all I could afford with my savings, a humble structure sinking under the weight of peeling paint and an overgrown garden. My family would have seen it as worthless. I saw a canvas. Weekends were no longer for poring over Vance Sterling reports but for sanding floors, reglazing windows, and coaxing life back into the neglected garden. I learned about plumbing from online tutorials and about sourcing reclaimed materials from old-timers at salvage yards. 6 months later, I sold the little bungalow to a young family, the modest profit feeling more valuable than any bonus I had ever received from my father. It was the first stone laid in the foundation of my own life. It was during this time that I met Maya Lin. I was at a seminar on sustainable urban design, and she was the keynote speaker. She spoke with a passion and clarity that electrified the room. She was a landscape architect by training and a visionary by nature, with a reputation for creating spaces that felt both innovative and deeply human. After her talk, I approached her, my heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and excitement. I showed her my fledgling portfolio, just the one bungalow, and my detailed plans for the Albina project my family had dismissed. She studied my work, her dark eyes thoughtful. "You don't just see buildings," she said finally, looking up at me. "You see homes. You see neighborhoods. Most developers want to impose their will on a city. You seem to want to listen to it." That conversation was the beginning of everything. Maya had the charisma and public-facing confidence that I lacked, while I had the strategic mind and financial acumen to turn her beautiful visions into viable realities. We were two halves of a whole. We decided to form a company, a small, nimble firm dedicated to the kind of restorative, community-focused development we both believed in. We called it the Hearthstone Collective. The name felt right. It spoke of warmth, of home, of the very foundation of a good life. Over the next 4 years, Hearthstone Collective grew, quietly and intentionally. We bought a neglected brick warehouse and transformed it into a thriving marketplace for local artisans. We took a block of rundown storefronts and helped small, independent businesses take root. We became known for our meticulous restorations, our green building practices, and our deep respect for the architectural soul of Portland. Each success was a quiet affirmation, a whispered secret I held close. Maya became the face of Hearthstone. Her warmth and eloquence made her a natural leader, and she handled the press, the city council meetings, and the public relations with a grace I deeply admired. I remained behind the scenes, the silent partner, the strategist poring over blueprints and balance sheets in our sunlit office in a restored factory building. My name wasn't on our website, my picture wasn't in our brochures. This anonymity was a sanctuary. It allowed me to work, to create, to build, free from the suffocating judgment of my family. They had no idea. To them, Hearthstone Collective was just another small, idealistic firm in a crowded market, one they barely registered as a competitor. They had no reason to connect it to me. The quiet, unambitious Alara who still showed up for Sunday dinners was, in their minds, still just drifting along, a shareholder in name only. "You seem distracted lately," my father commented one evening, after I'd begged off early from yet another dinner. "You should come into the office more often, Alara. Get involved. It's your legacy, too." "I am involved," I'd replied softly. "In my own way." He had simply shaken his head, a sad smile on his face, and I had walked out into the cool Portland night, the keys to my own world safe in my pocket. One rainy afternoon, Maya walked into my office, 2 steaming mugs of tea in her hands. She placed one on my desk, beside a mountain of blueprints for our latest project, the very same Albina block I had proposed at Vance Sterling years ago. We had finally acquired it. "You're going to burn a hole in that table with your stare," she said, her voice warm with amusement. She sank into the worn leather chair opposite me. "Still feels unreal, doesn't it?" I smiled, tracing the lines of the old buildings on the drawing. "It feels like coming home," I admitted. I can't believe we're actually doing it." "We're doing it because your vision was sound, Alara." "It was then, and it is now," she said firmly. She took a sip of her tea, her expression growing more serious. "Vance Sterling passed on this property again 6 months ago. Leo called it a sentimental money pit. Their loss is our gain, as usual." We had quietly, steadily, begun to outmaneuver my family's company in the niche market of urban restoration. We were winning bids on properties they deemed insignificant, turning their forgotten corners of the city into our shining successes. The irony was a constant, low hum in the background of my life. Maya leaned forward, her elbows on her knees. "This project is going to make waves, Alara. Big ones. It's our most ambitious yet. People are going to start paying more attention. Are you prepared for that?" I looked out the large window of our office. Below, the city bustled, a tapestry of movement and life. The rain had softened to a fine mist, giving the world a soft, pearlescent glow. "I'm not doing this for them, Maya," I said, more to myself than to her. "I'm not trying to prove a point anymore." "I know," she said gently. "You're doing this because it's who you are. But the world has a funny way of catching up. When your father and brother finally realize that the Sentimental Money Pit is the most celebrated redevelopment project in the city, and that you're behind it, well, I'd love to be in the room when that happens." I laughed, a real, unburdened sound. "You're enjoying this a little too much." "I'm enjoying watching my best friend step into her power," she corrected, her smile wide and genuine. "And you're not done yet." "Not even close." She raised her mug in a toast. "To the Sentimental Money Pits." I clinked my mug against hers, a quiet strength settling in my chest. "To the Money Pits," I echoed, my eyes on the plans for Albina, a blueprint not just for a neighborhood, but for my own becoming. The annual Pacific Northwest Real Estate Symposium was the biggest event of the year, a glittering affair where deals were whispered over cocktails and reputations were made or broken. It was my father and Leo's natural habitat. I had never attended. The thought of navigating that sea of egos, of standing in a corner while my family held court, was my idea of a nightmare. "We have to go this year," Maya announced one afternoon, tossing an embossed invitation onto my desk. "Hearthstone is a finalist for the Innovator of the Year award. For the Albina project." My stomach clenched. "A finalist? That's wonderful, Maya. You should definitely go." She fixed me with a look that was both gentle and non-negotiable. "We, Alara. We are a finalist. You are the heart of that project. You've earned a night to see your work celebrated, even if it's from the back of the room. I'll do all the talking. Just be there." Reluctantly, I agreed. I told myself I could be invisible. My father and Leo would be so absorbed in their own networking they would hardly notice my presence. I chose a simple, elegant dark green dress, a color that felt like the forests of the Pacific Northwest, a color I could disappear into. The venue was a restored Art Deco theater, its gilded ceilings and velvet seats glowing under the warm lights. The air buzzed with energy, a mix of ambition and champagne. I saw them almost immediately, my father, standing tall and confident, commanding a small circle of admirers, Leo, at his side, looking restless and arrogant. I felt a familiar pang, the old instinct to shrink away, but then Maya squeezed my arm. "Our table is over here," she said, steering me toward a group of our smiling colleagues. Safe harbor. From our vantage point, I could observe my family without being drawn into their orbit. As I watched them, a strange sense of detachment washed over me. They were no longer the giants of my childhood, but simply two men in expensive suits, playing a game I no longer wished to win. The awards ceremony began. One by one, the categories were announced. I watched my father's expression tighten as Vance Sterling was passed over for Commercial Development of the Year, and again for Lifetime Achievement. Leo's smirk faded, replaced by a sullen pout. I felt a flicker not of triumph, but of a distant, sorrowful understanding. They had built an empire on size and scale, but the industry was changing. It was valuing something else now, soul. Finally, the last award of the night was announced. And the 2023 Innovator of the Year award, the presenter boomed, an award for a firm that has demonstrated exceptional vision, community integration, and a commitment to sustainable, human-centric design, goes to the Hearthstone Collective. A wave of applause swept through the theater. My heart leaped into my throat. Our team erupted in cheers, and Maya, beaming, stood and hugged me tightly. "Our turn," she whispered, before making her way toward the stage. I watched her, a proud ache in my chest, as she accepted the heavy, gleaming award. The spotlight illuminated her, and she looked every bit the visionary leader she was. My father and Leo were staring at the stage, their faces a mixture of confusion and mild annoyance at being beaten by a smaller, lesser-known firm. "Thank you," Maya began, her voice resonating with warmth and confidence through the theater. "This is an incredible honor. The Albina project was a labor of love for our entire team. It was built on a belief that development shouldn't erase a neighborhood's history, but celebrate it. That a building is more than just an asset, it's a home, a gathering place, a part of a living community." The audience applauded warmly. She let the sound fade, then took a small step closer to the microphone, her expression shifting into something more personal, more intimate. "But I can't accept this award alone," she continued, her voice dropping slightly, drawing the entire room in. "Because the truth is, the vision for this project, the very soul of Hearthstone Collective, doesn't come from me. It comes from my partner." I felt my blood run cold. I saw Maya's eyes scan the room, a small, deliberate smile on her face as they found me. "She has been the silent, steady heart of our company from the very beginning," Maya said, her gaze holding mine. "She is the strategist who finds the hidden gems, the planner who sees community where others see decay, and the artist who breathes life back into forgotten spaces. Many of you in this room don't know her name, because she has never sought the spotlight. She has only ever sought to do good, meaningful work. The genius behind every success we've had, every community we've helped build, is my partner, my inspiration, and my dearest friend, Ilara Vance." A profound, stunned silence descended upon the theater. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Then, a low murmur began, rippling through the crowd as heads turned, searching. My name, the Vance name, hung in the air, connecting the dots with an audible click. I felt 1,000 pairs of eyes land on me. My gaze flickered, against my will, to my family's table. My father was frozen, his wine glass halfway to his lips, his face a mask of utter disbelief. Leo looked as though he had been struck. His jaw was slack, his face pale with shock that was rapidly curdling into something else, humiliation. Even Clara, who had joined them, was staring at me, her eyes wide with a dawning, astonished comprehension. On stage, Maya was not finished. Her voice was full of a fierce, protective pride. Ilara's brilliance is a quiet one. It doesn't need to shout. It builds, it restores, it nurtures. She has taught me, and shown this city, that the most powerful ambition isn't the one that seeks to conquer, but the one that seeks to create. It is long past time that she got the credit she deserves. Maya turned, her smile radiant, and extended her hand toward me. Ilara, please come up here. This belongs to you. For a heart-stopping moment, I was paralyzed. The weight of every gaze, every whispered comment, pressed down on me. I felt the familiar urge to shrink, to disappear. But then I saw Maya's unwavering belief in her eyes. I saw my colleagues at the Hearthstone table, on their feet, their faces alight with pride. And I felt a new strength, solid and deep, rise up within me. Slowly, I pushed back my chair and stood. My legs felt unsteady, but my spine was straight. With each step I took down the aisle and up the stairs to the stage, I felt the old, invisible cloak of my family's expectations fall away. I was not the quiet footnote. I was the author of a story they had never bothered to read. I reached Maya's side, and she pressed the cool, heavy award into my hands. She kept her hand on my shoulder, a warm, grounding presence. This is Ilara Vance, she said into the microphone, her voice ringing with triumphant clarity. And her work is just beginning. The applause that erupted was no longer polite. It was a roar. Standing in the warm bath of the spotlight, the tangible proof of my work in my hands, I looked out at the sea of faces. My eyes found my father's. The shock was still there, but beneath it, I saw something new, something I had never seen him direct at me before, a flicker of stunned, undeniable respect. Maya gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. Your turn, she whispered. I stepped toward the microphone, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I had never been one for public speaking, but the words came not from a place of performance, but from a place of simple truth. Thank you, I said, my voice surprisingly clear and steady. Thank you, Maya, for seeing me when no one else did. And for being a partner in every sense of the word. I paused, taking a breath. When we started Hearthstone Collective, we wanted to build things that would last, things with soul. We looked for the beauty in the places that had been forgotten. My gaze swept across the room, a brief, impersonal glance. To everyone who has supported our vision, thank you. And to those who didn't see the value in those forgotten places. I allowed a small, genuine smile to touch my lips. Thank you for leaving them for us to find. A wave of appreciative laughter and renewed applause followed. It felt like a release. I stepped back, and Maya and I walked off the stage together, the sound of the crowd washing over us. Now that, Maya said, her eyes sparkling as she looped her arm through mine, was a moment. Back at our table, we were swarmed by well-wishers. I accepted their congratulations, feeling dazed, as if I were floating slightly above my own body. Through the crowd, I could see my family's table. They were isolated in a bubble of tense silence. Leo was on his feet, pacing a short line, his face a thundercloud. Clara looked torn, glancing between her brother and me. My father sat perfectly still, his hands clasped on the table, staring at a fixed point in the distance. I think a storm is brewing over in Vanceland, Maya murmured, handing me a glass of water. Let it brew, I said, surprised by my own calm. The validation I had craved for so long, I realized, wasn't what I was feeling now. What I felt was not triumph over them, but a quiet, solid sense of my own wholeness. Their reaction, whatever it would be, was secondary. Eventually, the crowd thinned, and I knew I couldn't avoid them any longer. My father approached our table, Leo and Clara trailing behind him like reluctant satellites. Ilara, he said. His voice was strained, stripped of its usual booming authority. Maya stood, a picture of grace. Mr. Vance, she said, extending a hand. A pleasure to finally meet you. Your daughter is a true visionary. My father shook her hand mechanically, his eyes locked on me. We need to talk. Leo scoffed, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Talk about what? The fact that my own sister has been building a competing company behind our backs? Undercutting us? Making a fool of us? The accusation hung in the air, sharp and bitter. Before I could respond, Maya's voice cut through the tension, smooth as silk but with an edge of steel. Making a fool of you? I don't think Alara needed to do anything to achieve that, Leo. Your company's performance speaks for itself. She was simply succeeding where you were failing to adapt. Leo's face flushed a deep, angry red, but my father raised a hand, silencing him. That's enough, he said, his voice rough. He turned back to me, his expression a complex tapestry of emotions I couldn't begin to unravel. Can we go outside, Alara? Please. Just for a moment. I nodded and followed him out onto a quiet, wind-swept terrace overlooking the river. The city lights glittered below, a silent, jeweled landscape. For a long time, he just stood there, gripping the cold metal railing. I had no idea, he finally said, his voice low and gravelly. He didn't look at me. All this time. Hearthstone Collective. That was you. Yes, I said simply. He shook his head, a slow, bewildered motion. The projects, the awards, they're brilliant. Why didn't you tell me? A humorless laugh escaped my lips. Tell you? I turned to face him, the cool breeze catching a strand of my hair. When would I have told you, Dad? Between lectures on my lack of ambition? Or after you and Leo dismissed my work as a sentimental money pit without even looking at the proposal? He flinched as if I'd struck him. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me from what? The question was raw, edged with years of frustration. From success? From proving that my way of seeing the world has value? Or just from proving you wrong? He finally turned to look at me, and in the dim light of the city, I saw the deep lines of fatigue around his eyes. From failure, he said, his voice barely a whisper. This world is ruthless, Alara. I've seen it chew up and spit out people with twice your gentleness. I didn't want to see you get hurt. The old wound ached, but the sting was distant now. You weren't protecting me, Dad, I said, my voice soft but unyielding. You were underestimating me. There's a difference. You were so busy looking for the fire, you didn't see the strength in the roots. He held my gaze, and for the first time, I felt he was truly seeing me, not the daughter he thought he had, but the woman I had become. He let out a long, heavy sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years. I was wrong, he said. The words were quiet, but they landed with the force of a tectonic shift. Tonight, you've made that very clear. I was wrong. A week later, my father requested a formal meeting. He arrived at the Hearthstone office, a place of reclaimed wood, exposed brick, and abundant natural light, the antithesis of the cold, corporate gloss of Vance Sterling. He looked out of place in his severe suit, a relic from another world. Maya and I met him in our conference room. The morning sun streamed through the large warehouse windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He placed a thick, leather-bound folder on the table between us. Alara, Maya, he began, his voice back to its familiar, commanding tone, though a new note of caution underpinned it. I've reviewed Hearthstone's portfolio. It's impressive. Innovative. I've spoken with the Vance Sterling board. We are prepared to make a significant offer to acquire the Hearthstone Collective and merge it into our operations. You would have full creative control, of course, Alara. It was the ultimate validation in his world. An acquisition. A conquest. Proof of value. Maya glanced at me, a subtle, questioning arch in her eyebrow, but she remained silent, letting the moment be mine. I looked at the folder, then back at my father. I didn't need to open it. I knew what was inside, numbers, clauses, and a life I no longer wanted. I leaned back in my chair, the sunlight warm on my face. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it filled the room. My father's composure faltered. Ilara, this is a very generous offer. Don't be hasty. This is your chance to come home, to take your rightful place. I am home, I interrupted gently. Here. In this company, doing this work. This isn't for sale, Dad. I pushed the folder softly back across the table toward him. Hearthstone isn't just an asset on a balance sheet. It's a philosophy. It's my life's work. And it's not for sale. He stared at me, then at the folder, and then back at me. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant hum of the city. He looked older than I had ever seen him, the certainty that had been his armor for so long now cracked and weathered. Finally, he nodded slowly. He stood, leaving the folder on the table. I underestimated you, Ilara, he said again, but this time, the words held a different weight. Not of defeat, but of a quiet, profound realization. I won't make that mistake again. He turned and walked out of the conference room, his footsteps echoing in the sunlit hall. When he was gone, Maya let out a long, slow breath. Well, she said, a brilliant smile spreading across her face. That was something. I stood and walked to the window, looking down at the streets of the city I loved. I saw the Albina project in the distance, a hive of activity and renewal. I felt a sense of peace settle over me, deep and unshakable. I hadn't needed to win a war against my family. I had only needed to win the quiet battle for myself. The door to a new kind of relationship with my father was, perhaps, slightly ajar, but it would be on my terms now, built on the solid ground of who I truly was. My future was my own, a landscape of my own design, waiting to be built. Of course. Here is the continuation of the story. The quiet that settled in our office after my father left was profound. It wasn't an empty silence, but one filled with the weight of a decision that had altered the foundations of my world. Maya came and stood beside me at the window, her presence a silent, unwavering affirmation. You know, she said, her voice soft, for a man who built an empire on hostile takeovers, he took that no with a surprising amount of grace. He's learning a new language, I murmured, watching his dark car pull away from the curb and disappear into the flow of city traffic. I think it's a difficult one for him. Good, Maya said, with a smile in her voice. He's had it easy for too long. The first ripple from my decision came not from my father or Leo, but from Clara. She called me that evening, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. So, she began, without any preamble, I hear a certain Vance has officially been declared a non-acquirable asset. I couldn't help but laugh, the tension of the day finally breaking. Is that what they're calling it? Among other things, she said wryly. The mood at the Sunday dinner you wisely skipped was Arctic. Leo paced around like a caged wolf, muttering about betrayal and market shares. Dad was silent. Utterly, unervingly silent. He just sat and looked at his plate, and for the first time in my life, I had the feeling he wasn't thinking about business at all. She paused. I'm proud of you, Ilara. I know I never said it, but watching you on that stage, it was like watching you finally unfold. Her words were a balm. For years, Clara and I had existed in separate orbits, both of us having found our own ways of escaping the crushing gravity of Vance Sterling. Now, it felt as though our orbits had finally aligned. Thank you, Clara. That means more than you know. Just be ready, she warned. The silence from Dad is one thing. Leo's fury is another. He won't let this go. She was right. 2 days later, Leo appeared at the Hearthstone office. He didn't call ahead. He simply strode in, his expensive suit a stark slash of corporate gray against the warm wood and soft colors of our reception area. He bypassed our startled receptionist and pushed open the glass door to my office. We need to talk, he said, his voice tight with suppressed rage. I remained seated, gesturing to the chair opposite my desk. It was the same chair my father had sat in. Hello, Leo. You know, most people call first. He ignored the chair, choosing to stand, to loom. Don't play games with me, Alara. I want to know why. Why would you throw Dad's offer back in his face? He was handing you the keys to the kingdom. Your own division, your own budget, everything you ever claimed you wanted. I never claimed I wanted that, I said calmly, my hands resting on my desk. I focused on keeping my voice even, on not letting him see the old, familiar tremor start in my hands. I wanted my work to be respected. I wanted to build things that mattered to me. I've done that. Here. Oh, please, he sneered, the sound ugly and familiar. This boutique feel-good operation? It's nothing. A rounding error on our balance sheet. You got lucky with one project, got one award, and now you think you're some kind of visionary? You betrayed this family for a pat on the back and a shiny trophy. His words were designed to wound, to shrink me back into the little sister he had always dismissed. And a part of me, the old Alara, felt the sting. But another, newer part held firm. This feel-good operation, I said, meeting his furious gaze, is profitable, respected, and debt-free. Can you say the same for your Pearl District Tower, Leo? My work isn't about betraying anyone. It's about building. You only see it as betrayal because you can't imagine a world where not everyone wants to be you. He was stunned into silence, his mouth slightly agape. He had come expecting a fight or a capitulation, not a calm, sharp-edged truth. You've been so busy trying to be Dad, I continued, my voice softening slightly, that you never stopped to figure out who you are without him. I had to. You drove me to it. So in a way, I should probably thank you. He stared at me, his anger visibly deflating, replaced by a raw, wounded confusion. He looked less like a corporate titan and more like a boy who had just been told the rules of the game had changed without his consent. Without another word, he turned and walked out of my office. I listened to his footsteps fade down the hall, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger toward him, or fear, or even satisfaction. I felt a profound, aching pity. The next move came, once again, from my father. But it was not the move I expected. He sent me a text message one Saturday morning, a medium he had always disdained as inefficient. Where is that little park you built? The one in the Selwood Moorland neighborhood. I hesitated, then typed back the address. I didn't ask why. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. I'm here. Curiosity overriding my apprehension, I drove over. It was one of our smallest, earliest projects, a tiny, neglected pocket park we had resurrected. We'd rebuilt the old gazebo, planted a garden full of native pollinators, and installed chess tables made from reclaimed timber. When I arrived, I saw him. He wasn't in his car or on the phone. He was sitting on one of the simple wooden benches, his briefcase on the ground beside him, watching a young couple teach their toddler how to walk on the soft grass. I approached slowly and sat on the other end of the bench. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the sounds of the park, children's laughter, the buzz of bees, the distant clang of the Max train, filling the space between us. The brickwork on the path, he said finally, his voice quiet. It's reclaimed. From the old textile mill that used to be a few blocks from here. I looked at him, surprised. How did you know? I read the dedication plaque, he said, gesturing with his chin toward a small bronze marker near the entrance. I never read those things. He turned to look at me, his gaze direct and stripped of its usual armor. All those years, Alara. I was teaching you how to build an empire. And you were quietly learning how to build a world. I was so focused on the skyline, I forgot that people live on the ground. A lump formed in my throat. This was more than an apology. It was a confession. It was an admission of a blindness that went far deeper than business. This place, he continued, looking around at the small, perfect space, it won't make the cover of any magazines. Its return on investment is probably negligible in purely financial terms. But it's good. It's a genuinely good thing. He looked down at his own hands, large and capable, which had built so much but had never created anything quite like this. I don't know how to do this. It's okay, Dad, I said softly. Neither do I. That afternoon in the park was the beginning of a slow, careful reconstruction. We started talking, really talking, for the first time. He would ask me about Hearthstone's projects, not as a competitor, but with a genuine, almost academic, curiosity. He wanted to understand the why behind them, the philosophy I had tried to explain in that conference room years ago. In return, I started asking him about the early days of Vance Sterling, not about the conquests, but about the dreams he'd had as a young man, before the empire became a fortress. We decided to try another Sunday dinner. The thought of it still filled me with a low-level dread, but I knew it was a necessary step. When I walked into my parents' house, the air was different. The tension was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but it wasn't the suffocating force it used to be. Leo was subdued, his anger having cooled into a sullen resentment. He barely looked at me. My mother, who had always floated above our conflicts in a cloud of gentle detachment, watched us all with a new, keen awareness. Clara was a warm, steadying presence at my side. And my father was different. He led the conversation, but he didn't hold court. He asked Clara about her new gallery installation, and he listened, truly listened, to her answer. He talked about a book on urban history he was reading. He steered the conversation away from market shares and toward ideas. At one point, Leo, unable to help himself, made a cynical remark about the city's new green building initiative, calling it unprofitable nonsense. Before I could even form a response, my father spoke. There's more than one way to measure profit, Leo, he said mildly, not looking at his son, but at me. Your sister has been teaching me that. Leo fell silent, staring at his plate. In that moment, the power dynamic at the table, a structure that had been fixed for 3 decades, finally and irrevocably shifted. It wasn't a victory. It was a rebalancing. The evening ended peacefully. As I was leaving, my father walked me to the door. Ilara, he said, pausing with his hand on the doorknob. I want you to consider joining the Vance Sterling board. I felt my defenses rise immediately. Dad, we talked about this. No, he interrupted, holding up a hand. Not as an employee. Not as an acquisition. As an independent director. As an equal. We need your voice. Your perspective. I need it. I looked at him, at the genuine plea in his eyes, and I saw the truth of it. This wasn't a tactic. It was a bridge. It was his way of saying he was ready to not just respect my world, but to let a piece of it into his own. I'll think about it, I said. And for the first time, I knew I truly would. I drove back to my own home, the city lights of Portland spread out below me like a blanket of scattered diamonds. The reconciliation wasn't perfect. The wounds weren't all healed. My relationship with Leo was a ruin that might never be rebuilt. But it was a beginning. The next morning, I stood in my office at Hearthstone, looking at the plans for our next project, a small library and learning center for an underserved community. The work felt more meaningful than ever. I had fought to build this company, to build this life, to prove my own worth to myself. I had thought the goal was to get out from under my family's shadow. But I was beginning to realize that the real journey was about learning how to stand in my own light and, perhaps, to be generous enough to let that light shine back on them, showing them a different way home. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt truly, completely my own.